Perfect. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have new people on and people who've joined me since the very beginning. And this is fabulous. And so I look forward to this conversation with my friend Joni. Joni and I go way back to Asia, and
Yes.
now we were both in Asia, and now we're both in Europe. And Joni's in Paris, and I'm in Berlin, and we're going to have a fantastic conversation about her work with the transgender women in Paris. And so we'll just go started. So why don't you give us a little bit of introduction about who is Joni?
Yeah, Joni is from Alaska. I am a very proud Southeast Alaska girl. Was born in Seattle, but raised there. And very proud of growing up in that multicultural environment in a hippie household. So I say that because I feel like that God just used that to set me up for working with trafficked people. When in my hometown, my parents would go out to the bars, and the bars would bring in dancers, exotic dancers, and my parents would get to know them like people. And so they'd say, hey, why don't you come over for dinner? And so I never knew, it was just these people that my parents were meeting, and they'd come over for dinner. And we thought they were cool because they'd tell all these stories about all these places they'd been to. And it wasn't until I got involved with this work that I went, oh, shoot, I wonder if they were trafficked. So I kind of laugh about that intersection in my own biography with this movement. I did not ever intend to work with trafficked people. I was already a missionary with an organization working in Africa, having a ball, just being a normal missionary, really, is what I say. I
There's
came
such a
home
thing?
to,
There's no such thing.
yeah, I don't know that there is, but I did things like drive horse
Yeah.
carts and
Yeah.
live
Yeah.
without electricity in
Yeah.
grass huts,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I feel like that's that old stereotype.
Yeah. Right.
I came home to raise my support and heard about a project in South Asia and literally took it on as a prayer request, not ever intending to be involved, just was so impressed with the concept that they were working with people who had been trafficked into India for prostitution. And so I just started praying for them. That was all it was. And about 6 months later, I realized that the prayer request was more a call, and really started asking questions and doing research and figuring out what this is all about. And within a year, I was officially accepted with that organization to work in South Asia. So I went to South Asia. I've been with Project Rescue, is the organization I'm with the Assemblies of God. I've been with them since 1998. Arrived in India in 1999. And so I kind of cut my teeth and learned all about this area in India with incredible practitioners who were also learning. And so in Calcutta, we just learned together. Worked in one of the largest red light areas in the world, resident population of about 13,000 women. During religious festivals that would peak to over 30,000.
Yeah.
And so it was immersed in it, and then was asked if I would consider coming to Europe when our project moved into Europe. So I've had a ball.
Great. And so
And
then
with,
you moved to Europe and you moved from India to Paris. Okay. And so how long have you
yes,
been
I
there?
did.
Yeah.
I've been in Paris for 5 years now.
Okay.
5 years and like 6 weeks.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
yeah, I've been here 5 years.
So tell us about, let's just start out and give a background, give us a picture of what prostitution, sex work, sex exploitation, sex trafficking situation is there in Paris, or maybe France in general, if that's relevant.
Yeah, it's the history of prostitution in France goes way, way back, it to the Romans. There were little places along, throughout Gaul, where the Romans would take captives or take women and do stuff. So it's nothing it's not new here. The 19th century actually became quite famous, and Paris became pretty celebrated in the arts for prostitution. But you can go back. Paris has had a long, long history with prostitution. It's funny, sometimes you watch these historical series, and they'll throw in this little scene with the King of France, sneaking away, Henry II or Henry IV sneaking away to Paris to, go to a brothel or something. So it's not anything new. Became much more celebrated towards the end of the 19th century, with the beginning of Moulin Rouge, and then Pigalle starting up around Moulin Rouge, and more prostitution happening. And then again in the mid 20th century, trafficking kind of got going, and you saw people being brought in from various parts of the world. So it isn't new to France. It isn't new to Paris, but it's definitely much more diverse now than it's ever been.
Yeah. So is it legal? Is it, or what's the legality there? Because what's the legal dynamic? It's tricky. I know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky because France adopted the Nordic model in 2016 officially. So it is no longer illegal to sell sex, but it is illegal to buy sex and to traffic people, to pimp people out. So it's kind of new. They're in a transition period, and there's a lot of controversy over that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how does so now let's get to the issue of the trans women, because that's mostly, that's 99.9% of the people in prostitution of the trans, they're the trans women. And so where are they falling more on so they there to prostitute? It's sort of not really legal, but it is. Are they trafficked, or who are the trans women?
Yeah, it kind of depends on who you talk to, as to whether they're trafficked or not.
Mm-hmm.
The trans organizations, the advocacy organizations, talk about them being migrant workers. And, they've, in more recent years especially, they come because they have a friend who's here who, makes a way for them to come. So there's a lot of relational movement that's happening for them to come. Technically, many of them fit the trafficking definition, in that they didn't have all the information when they came. They may have come to do, they may have been involved with prostitution already in their country, and now they've come here. So then you have to go back to the beginning of how did they get into prostitution in their own country. So it's definitely in the realm, like it is in so many countries, of being very complex. It's most of our people that we work with would not self-identify as trafficking victims. And some of them wouldn't even want to identify as being in sexual exploitation or being in prostitution against their will, that they would fall into that line of, I am a migrant worker, I'm an undocumented worker, I am here because I'm working.
Right. And so you think
our people I'm sorry, the second part of yours, the people specifically that we work with are from South America.
And so are they coming? So they're coming there to do sex work, to do prostitution, or do you think maybe they've been or do you think maybe they've been told something?
Some are coming. Yeah, we had a case last year. We're still not entirely sure of the exact details, but it was a repatriation case that we worked with, where we helped someone return to their home. We assumed there was a high probability of trafficking. She was in a brothel, but she came to be the cleaner. So our relationship with her was very short. It was at the very, very beginning. She just said almost immediately to Elizabeth that she wanted to go home. So we don't have lots of really good detail on her, but I think she illustrates a really common situation where someone is brought to do another job in a sexualized environment, and then can be easily pulled into prostitution from that.
Yeah. And some are maybe, instead of being drawn to Paris, they may be escaping a life, a discrimination or stigma back where they've come from, right?
Back home. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some are coming in because they want to do their sex reassignment
Sure.
surgeries. And so then they stay, for that. So
Right.
yeah, there are a lot of reasons.
Yeah, and there's links, like when I talk with Tina, who works in Pisa, Italy, they're talking like they'll have a friend, they'll have contacts, and then they'll get sponsored, or they say, yeah, we can help fix you up here, and I'm sure it's a little bit the same for you there too.
We have a bit of a family that
Uh-huh.
we're working with, where there's 3 members of a family who are here, and then we're close with pretty much all 3 of them. And they are not all trans. It's trans and women in that family who have come.
I mean, a literal family, not a literal family. You're talking about a friend family.
Literal family.
Literal family.
Yeah,
Okay.
literal family. They are familial related in their own country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Aunt, nieces, sisters. There's
Sure. Yeah.
a literal family.
That's interesting. So talk a little bit, paint a picture about what's a typical day when you're working. I mean, you mentioned Project 25, and are you doing outreach? Are you in the street? Do you have a center? What does that look like? And how do you initiate? Are the women coming to you, or your ladies coming to you? Just walk us through a little bit about how that works.
So one of the things that I feel like I need to preface it with the beginning. Elizabeth and I'm referring to Elizabeth, who is here. So if I say something wrong, she's going to know it. But Elizabeth is the president of an association that has worked with refugees and refugee families for over 16 years in Paris, and has a very well-established reputation in her arrondissement, the area of Paris where she's working. And they established were able to buy a building on a particular street, and she noticed that people in prostitution had moved onto the street, that they were living in apartments across the street, down the street, next door kind of thing. And so they had also then, with their association, they had started a church plant. And that's when I got involved, because I happened to see that they were doing an afternoon church service, and I was just exhausted and having a difficult time waking up in the morning to go to a local church near me. So I thought, oh, this will be perfect. I'll just go to afternoon service in Paris, and then I can play in Paris the rest of the day. So I go. I think it was the second Sunday I was there. They had started talking to me about this. Ailey and I met at a conference for Project Rescue. She told me kind of what was going on, so I knew about it. And the second time we were there, one of the late trans women walked by. They greeted her, because that's their ethos. They're really good about, we are here for every single person who lives on our street. We're not here just for refugees. Now with number 25, we're not here just for people in prostitution. We're here for every single person that lives on our street. So they greeted her, and she didn't greet back. And the 3 leaders, all in one voice, turned to me and said, see, they won't even talk to us. What do we do? And that was my beginning with them, was, okay, let's talk about this. Let's figure out, how do we do that? The next month, there was a horrible murder in the Bois de Boulogne, where most of the trans women work, which is a forest on the southwestern side of the city. And this person that they had greeted, who wouldn't talk to them, several weeks later, Elizabeth had been able to talk to her, found out she spoke Spanish. Elizabeth is from a Spanish background. So that started that relationship. And then when this person was murdered, this, our neighbor, our trans neighbor, invited Elizabeth and to join her on the protest march about that person's death. which then led to Noemi and I being invited to go along. So our whole beginning was like things just fell in our lap.
Yeah.
And then the following, we were invited to another event then by that organization that's an advocacy organization for trans people in Paris. And then in October, we started number 25. So for us, our beginning is they live where we are, they don't work there. So that I need to say that to frame, because our work is very different than anything I've done before. So we reach out as neighbors. And often I call it a ministry of hospitality. That, you know, we have a drop-in time, come visit us, just drop in, you know, some will, some won't, depending on their day. Some will come and stay for an hour. We usually have a snack or coffee, tea for them. So we'll just sit and visit. This Tuesday, one of our people came for over an hour. We were there for about 3 hours, and he was there for about an hour and a half. And we just chatted about, you know, what's going on today, and, you know, normal everyday life. But in the course of those conversations, we will hear needs, or they may even ask for something. And so then we can move from their own felt needs.
And I want to come back to that, but I just want to stress the point that this is, I know you're all about dignity, and then this is organic. I mean, you're there to serve the neighborhood and you're there to serve everyone, but it's not like you had an agenda, you had no plan. You had a heart and you wanted to be open to everyone, but then just waiting for the moment and reaching out, saying hello, and making contacts, but then waiting on them to contact you. And then those relationships develop organically. It's not an agenda. You're not planning. You're not going to say, yes, we have a ministry for this, and forcing something that's perfunctory. But that you're just, but you were there, you planted yourself, and you were ready to open your doors. And so when the time was right, well, then Project 25 could start. And now you have this drop-in center, and people know, and they, you know, we know it takes a long time for those relationships to develop, you know, and trust, and that you're there where they live.
Also,
and that's
the whole,
and
I was going to say too, the whole team was new except for me. They were all brand new to this field. And so I was very intentional about holding them back and letting them take baby steps. Often they were saying, why can't we do this? Why can't we do this? Why can't we do this? And it's like, guys, you're so new. You need to get your feet wet and just kind of.
And it's not about you. Because it's not about you. And it's not about what you do. Yes, we do offer, but it's not about you. And that's so important. So let's talk about moving. And so you have this drop-in center, and you're developing relationships, and people are feeling comfortable sharing their needs. And so then, you know, does that lead to them leaving or to stay? Or, you know, talk us about like what you're offering, and sort of a couple of stories about how you've been able to help people, and what are their needs? Is housing a need? Is it, you know, what are the particular needs, and how can you meet them?
And this is where, you know, Elizabeth has been such an amazing resource, because I don't speak Spanish. I mean, I'm learning little word here and there, but I've had to concentrate on my French. But Elizabeth speaks Spanish, and she's there during the week on other times to work with different families. And so she has been able to build this really amazing trust relationship where people will just come and they'll visit with her. She'll visit with them. She can, you know, direct and help. And because she's been working with refugees for so many years, she knows the system, and she can navigate. She is French, so she can navigate the French social system in ways that I don't even understand, because it's so different from the American social system. So that, I mean, there's just no way #Van5, which is what we're called in French, or number 25, could exist without Elizabeth and our French teammates, because they know that system. So Elizabeth has worked with various officials with the mayor's office. There's a food distribution that happens normally every other Friday, but during COVID that happened every Friday. And that was, I mean, we increased our contact list by 400% during COVID because of the food distribution and stuff. And now more recently, she said one of the advocacy organizations for transgender people is now sending some of their people to us for the food distribution. And I say that because that shows the benefit of having a local champion, a local person who understands the system, because there are simply things she can do that I cannot do and probably will never be able to do. And that's good. Yeah. That's a good thing. So we did walk this person through last year through the repatriation case, which was huge. It took a lot of effort. It took 4 of us, excuse me. It took 4 of us working pretty much around the clock for 7 to 10 days to get her out of the country. And it took calls on my part. Most of what I did was a networking part, and I had video chats and WhatsApp chats and texts and emails and phone calls with about 50 people. So
I mean, it's like people don't understand the effort that it takes to help an individual, you know, and we're talking with someone who is, you know, probably trafficked and desperate, and, you know, so what are some of the other things? I mean, are your neighbors, are they, you know, is there a lot of violence, or they're lacking housing, or is it medical care, or kind of give us a picture about what are some of the ways that, you know, what's the niche, you know, that you're feeling there?
Our neighbors, it's not an issue of housing because that's how we know them. They live in the apartments on our street, across from us and stuff. Violence, very much so, is a part. We've had 2 significant issues, one with a survivor beating up her boyfriend, one with a boyfriend beating up a survivor. 2 different people. So yeah, violence is a big one. And again, Ailey's like, okay, you need to file a report with the police. You need to, you know, willing to do that. So she's trying to encourage them to do that. We had a case of a child bride, where the bride price had been paid for her. She wasn't, she's another one of our neighbors. Ailey had to, you know, go to bat for her with the government. A lot of our work with the, with the interface with French social services is more helping them to get their papers and documents in order, to get them into the French classes, to help with, you know, we have one that we've walked now through with getting a job. And Elizabeth's sister, who's one of our teammates, was able to help with that. She's a human resources manager. So, you know.
So your neighbors are at least legal. They're legal. They're there legally? Mostly?
Boy, I don't know if I can answer that with expert knowledge. They are definitely working on documentation.
Okay.
So some of them now are legal and some aren't.
Yeah. So, so is it, you find a willingness? I mean, and I know that that's not an expectation there's no expectations on your help to be contingent on leaving prostitution or detransitioning or anything like that. And I just want to say that for our listeners, that, you know, that you're extending help and dignity and honor to another human being without any expectations for any of their behaviors, and that's fine. But are you seeing people wanting to leave or being able to help facilitate, you know, different work out of prostitution? Or are you, you know, what does that look like? I mean, you may not have any stories like that, and that would be okay.
No, we do. We definitely have one person who has interviewed, done her trial day with a French business, and been given a job. And that was the process that Elizabeth's sister helped so much with, to help her get her CV together and all of that. We do have a person who became a Christian, and we don't know the sequence of events, but in the course of all that time, then exited prostitution and detransitioned.
Big
And
steps.
those are
huge.
huge.
Those are
And
huge.
that was all before I ever met the person. All
Wow.
3 of those steps happened before
Yeah.
I met the person. So we've been walking with him in his journey of doing that. So yeah, that's why I say it's such a mixed bag. You know, we've got people who would love to leave prostitution, but just don't have the means right yet,
Sure.
or who don't feel like they can. We've had a number of people with medical issues, with cancer and going through chemo and radiation and, you know, all of that. So yeah, it's basically, you know, we take what's presented to us on a daily basis. Our dream, of course, I mean, I'm a Christian. My dream is that everyone knows Jesus and has that peace that Jesus gives, and and to know that the dignity that God gives, because he created them in his image. But that doesn't mean just because they don't want to be a Christian, I'm going to stop working with them.
There's no agenda. You're not.
No,
and there's absolutely no agenda for working with them, and they're not your, you know, salvation project or anything like that.
But we're going to create the space for that.
Of course.
So,
well, I mean, but you are. I mean, by meeting, I mean, you just follow, like, this is you meet needs and you love them and you offer them help when no one else was, because, you know, we know what it's like. We were talking before about taking them, because when you do take them to the doctor, you do take them to the municipal office, you do take them to places, and then they're treated terribly. Absolutely nasty responses from the people, the helpers in the system. So, and then being able to stand up with them and say, no, I'm with this person.
Right.
And
and we're going to say, we had even one of my favorite stories to talk about, just with the overall behavior and attitude on the street. When we first started 3 years ago, you know, if we saw one of our neighbors walk by and we were inside the local Turkish restaurant that we all love, it's like our office, we would invite them to come in and join us. And the first time that Noemi, my co-facilitator, when she and I saw our neighbor and we invited her to come join us, we were out, there's 2 sections of the restaurant. One is a little bit more private, but we were out in the main area. Every table around us got up and left. And it was quite obvious that they weren't all finished with their meal. And Noemi and I just afterwards, we talked about it and said, okay, that was just odd. And we noticed that for a couple times. Now that's not the case. Our people can come in and eat with us all the time, and people don't get up and leave, even when we're in the back part that's more private. If a family's back there, they'll stay. So I think that's been a cool thing to see, that we've established that they are our people, that they are our friends, they are with us, and they're not, you know, that they can be respected on that end. And I think that's good.
Cool.
The other big development for us is in February, we started a once a month Spanish speaking church service for them. And so now we've got, you know,
because they wanted it, right? Yes, I know you talked about that. That's amazing.
It's so cool to see all these things just happen, because it was out of felt needs.
Yeah. And, you know, they're coming from countries that are Catholic and religious, and they have this background, they have this need. And they might have felt that, you know, their past, quote unquote, religious community, you know, rejected them there, but they're finding true love, and the true love of God, the true love of their creator there. And so that's cool. So talk about I'm going to talk about some challenges. You've talked about some blessings, but, you know, what are some challenges? You know, what are you facing, or what's new? What's challenging?
I would say the biggest challenge is with volunteers, staff and volunteers, Spanish speaking volunteers in a French speaking country.
Yeah.
that definitely has been a challenge. One of our teammates is from Colombia, actually, and then another one of our volunteers. We actually have 2 volunteers from Colombia, but one has been gone professionally for her job. But and then Noemi, who's American but is Spanish speaking. She's in the States right now, raising support. Elizabeth is Spanish speaking. Her sister is Spanish speaking. But then there are others of us that, we're learning French, which is a benefit because our people are learning French. Therefore, we can speak broken French to one another, and it helps them too. But definitely having staff, I would say Christian Spanish speaking staff who, and we know in our area, especially amongst in our evangelical, more traditional Christian milieu, working with transgender people is very, very different. It's something that's not, it's not an opportunity we have. And so having people be willing to step back and just, okay, they're just people.
Right.
That we've all had to walk through that of what does this look like to walk with somebody who looks so different than we expect. And and then for our Americans, and I've heard it from UK people too, because the transgender movement is so politicized in our countries, we come in with a whole different set of expectations that don't match up with the experience of our people.
No, that's absolutely true. Yes, it looks different. It looks way different because in Berlin, I'm seeing lots of trans from Eastern Europe, and they're in Berlin for sex work, and so that's there's some things that are sort of universally true about trans, but there's a lot of things that aren't, And I think, as we talk about one of my last questions, and I want to make sure we have time for our guests here, but, if people have a particular heart to reach out for trans, what would you recommend? How could people start out? Or it could be just something like, just get in touch with us. So what would you say about that? Because you need volunteers. So then, what would it look like for people to kind of, reach out and,
we need
get involved? Yeah. I mean, maybe not for you, but but there's people.
We need French volunteers big time, but we need volunteers. Always my first thing, and this was in the very first conversation that day at the church with the 3 leaders, it is a matter of just being willing to say hi. And to then wait for a response, and to not, because it is frustrating and it will take time. But that being willing to say hi and introduce yourself and just stop and pause is such an important step, because we keep going back to dignity, but it does give people that sense of, oh, you see me as a human being. You don't see me just as a trans person.
And we can do that while standing in line at the checkout in the supermarket. Hey, what a concept. Let's say hi to our neighbor, whoever they are.
And
how about that?
Even when that's a kind of a countercultural thing, because, here in France, you don't always greet everybody.
Well, that's true.
But it's a really, really important step. And one of the most amazing things that happened for me was within 3 months, I was running up the street to catch the metro. And one of our ladies saw me and I didn't see her. And she literally reached out and grabbed my arm and stopped me, turned me around and said, "You need to greet me." And I'm like, I'm so sorry. It had become such a big part of what we were doing.
Cool.
So now, just notice people and reach out. Secondly, find out organizations that are working with trans people. Even if, like this organization that we've had some contact with, even if they're not on the same page as you, still, look at their website at the very least, read their website and get to know what they're doing. And then just if you can really find a group that is already doing something. Always. That's the best, even if they're terrible. I mean, I've said that because some organizations don't have good practices, but you learn.
Yeah, well, we're working on that, aren't we, Joni?
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
but if you,
but I'm just
you know,
saying,
to anyone
time
listening,
short
to anyone listening, if you really are, I mean, this is just, we're having a short conversation here, but, you know, please reach out. Some of you may have seen my interview with Tina, who is working in Italy.
Excellent.
And so we all are colleagues together working in Europe. And so please do reach out to us for more questions and things like that. And so is there anything else you want to say? Because I will, just to wrap up, otherwise we'll continue this conversation with our guest participants here.
Let's let them ask questions. But the thing I would say is, I can say from the depths of my heart, I have landed in the ministry that God's been preparing me for my entire life. And it is the best thing that I've ever been involved with. And I have learned so much from our neighbors, and they are just precious, precious, precious people. They are teaching me things that I couldn't have learned in other places. So just don't be afraid to work with a group of people that you never thought you could work with. Just say hi and
and have an open heart and learn, a teachable spirit. That is for sure. Yep. That is for sure. So, well, it's been really awesome. Well, I'm sure you'll be back on again. We have lots more to talk about, and this has been lovely. And so now we're going to get to questions that our guest participants have been patiently waiting during our conversation. And so I will stop the recording, and we'll see you back here again. Bye.